What makes a useful business plan? What makes a business plan useful? We're going to examine this through a planning process for a toy store today. This is the Pretty Plush Store. They have 9 stores in bigger cities in the United States where they sell plush animals and plush dolls. We have been asked to assist with the yearly business planning process. For perspective, the accounting costs as a whole for a company should never exceed 2% of the revenue. It varies a little bit with the size of the company and with the complexity of the business model. But I used to think 1%, but modern accounting, if you do management accounting and a bit more complex stuff, then you probably get between 1.5 and 2% of the revenue. This company is somewhere between, I think they're around the 2.5 million mark for revenue. So that means 50,000 in accounting costs, which then means 4,000 a month, roughly. So if we are going to spend more than 40 person hours on this planning process, that would be too much. So that is about the scope that I see for this project. About 35 person hours, and we should be done. This is not too complex, so this is doable. One of the things you should decide when you plan a business is, do you want to do useful planning or wishful thinking? Because very often people just pull their numbers from somewhere and then they end up with wishful thinking. If you want your plan to have any use, base it on actual amounts of goods, services, product. Do not just put in some revenue figure that you pull from somewhere. Think, how many goods, how many services, products do I have to sell in order to get that revenue? From there, then you can find out, what resources do I need? How much human labor do I need? What materials do I need? And what amount, at what time? What will that cost? And then you can make a business plan that is founded in reality. Of course, as smarter people have already said, everybody has a plan until they get hit. And that is true. There will be things happening that do not allow you to execute your plan exactly as planned. But, as good old Mr. Eisenhower said, don't expect much from the plan, but the process of planning is crucial. Because the planning process leads you to ask questions about dynamics in your business. When you do this planning process consciously, you may question some of your assumptions. You might find out that some of your assumptions are wrong and would maybe lead you into a not so great place if you kept assuming that they were right. And as one of my best mentors said, Warren Berigian, to a large extent, the quality of your life and your business will be determined by the quality of questions you ask. The better, the deeper, and the more meaningful questions you ask, the more there will be a tendency to receive better and more powerful answers. What planning tools do we use? In this case, we're going to do it with Excel Power Query, and Power Pivot. People can get very hooked on tools, and up to medium complexity of the business, Microsoft Excel is totally fine to do a planning part. I've seen some pretty great planning done with Excel and some pretty horrible planning done with so-called advanced tools because the input wasn't so great, because people didn't think about amounts, they didn't think about dynamics, they didn't think about what was going to happen in real life, and everybody wants the shiny new toy. Of course I want the shiny new toy. I want the shiny new toy. I want the shiny new toy. Well, good luck with that. In fact, there are some things where you probably shouldn't use MS Excel. Like, theoretically, you can build a database with it and use it as a database, but I wouldn't do that. But to do medium complex calculations, and particularly to do graphics in the front end and reports in the front end, in my opinion, there is still no better tool. I've tried a lot of them and it's really good. So we're going to use it for this process. Two people from management are weighing in on the projections for next year. Like Pia from marketing says, a new VR toy superstore is opening in Jacksonville, Florida. We expect to lose some business to them in that city, probably up to 65% for that year. Then it will probably be regained. Good news, and the new kids show amazing Alicia. The main character has a plush ladybug that is from our store. So we expect the ladybug sales to go up by 35%. The plush ladybug will probably be a great seller. I think it already is a bit of a seller, but they expect sales to go up by 35%, and then they can probably raise the price even a little bit higher because it's an important thing to have when Alicia has one. Next year, there's another big toy trade fair, and sometimes trade fairs have a great influence on the business, and in this case, Pia doesn't expect it to have. Price raises, she thinks, will be accepted to a maximum of 5%, or otherwise, plush animals are usually not a higher priority than food for most people. So with the current situation, 5% is probably the ceiling. In general, with inflation, we expect consumption to go down maybe 9% all over. And Connor from General Operations says, rents are going up in all malls, projected 12%. Salaries will stagnate for the most part, but overseas production prices have already gone up from all factories worldwide, and I expect another increase at these percentages depending on the countries where the production is happening. In addition, it is important to talk to people on the ground who have the daily customer contact, and they may have something to weigh in, they may have something to say. Sometimes they do have something valuable to say, sometimes they don't, but that goes with management the same way. So how are we going to approach this planning process? We're going to analyze the IS data of 2022, which we have. We will discuss the assumptions from marketing, general operations, and external statistics. Then we will decide which assumptions to discard, accept, or modify, work them into the planning model, decide on the granularity of the plan that we want. Then we create our planning model. So we have a fairly simple model. We have a fact sales table with all the sales from 2022 for one sheet in the workbook for each shop: New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, Philadelphia, Jacksonville, Florida, Columbus, Ohio, and Charlotte in North Carolina. They were so nice to put the shop IDs into it. I mean, you just put it in once and then you double click it. It goes down the rows. So yeah, that's very nice. We have the product sold and the revenue. Then we have the product with product ID, product name, and some additional information. All the animals and dolls and what they're selling. Then, of course, we have the story dimension, so we can now put everything into a data model. In order to analyze the IS data from 2022, we're going to append all the shop sales data, go to new query from file, from Excel workbook, fact sales. Here comes a step I've never had to do in Power BI, but in Excel, Power Query, I guess we have to do it. So select multiple items in order for the checkboxes to appear. And then we'll go to transform data right away so we can start appending in the Power Query editor. Let's append them all. Append queries as new, 3 or more tables. Put them all together. And go. Now we have a big sheet and we're going to add it to the data model. What we still need for our small star schema are the products and the stores. although it's not going to be an exact star schema, it's going to be a snowflake schema with the product categories added. So first let's put in the stores. That's the easier one. Dim stores, transform data. Pretty much everything is in okay shape. There's still some issues with the number formats. We'll deal with that if we decide that we want to use the population data. Now remove the 10 bottom rows. Interestingly, you sometimes get these null rows. Now just go to existing connections and read in the queries. Dim products. And a new worksheet, please. And let's get in the stores. And little snowflake schema. Product ID, connect, please. Thank you. Store ID. Thank you. And then the product category is the last one. I just saw one thing that would make things easier in readability, because you see here in product name, we have the product name 3 times, sometimes twice, for depending on how many sizes they come. So most come in 3 sizes, a few come in 2 sizes. And in a pivot table, to distinguish like Tiger Amrit, SMNL, we would only have the name, or we would have to put in 2 columns. And when you put in 2 columns in a pivot table, if you've ever done that, you know it's not such a fun thing. So I'm going to combine prod name and size and say, give me product name ampersand space ampersand product size. Done. The next steps I'm planning to do is first explore the amounts of goods for all articles sold per month and explore the revenue per month per store, and then see how well they correlate. Let's say if one store sells half the amount but has the same revenue as another store, then they're probably selling more of the expensive products. Or another one sells triple the amount but has half the revenue, they're probably selling only the cheap ones. So then we would have to do more of a deep dive and analyze. I'm guessing it's not going to be the case. I'm guessing they're going to be selling more or less the same mix of products, because then we can go on and examine distributions over months and see how we put them into the plan. Otherwise, we will have to do a deeper dive. Okay, let's do the first one. Let's explore the amounts of products sold. Insert a pivot table from the data model and a new worksheet, please. Okay, let's go. Let's put the date in the columns. It usually does the month by default. Then put the stores, the city name. In the rows, we could also take the ID. And then give me a count of the product ID. By default, Excel will sum them up, which does not make too much sense here. So please give me a count. And there we have it. Now, since we're working with the data model, we can put the next pivot table right under it. Give me another pivot table from data model. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Now we're also going to have the stores and the rows, have the months and the columns. And please give me product price net and the values, and this time I do want it as a sum. Already started doing some correlation analysis. As you can see, I just copied one of the tables down, and now I'm putting in formulas. I don't know if you've ever done this with pivot tables, but the thing is, when you click into the cells and you do like equals this divided by this is it, then you get absolute cell addresses, and you cannot just copy the formula, because if you copy it down, you get the same value. So I've used a trick. I have tricked Excel into doing my bidding. I say, I type the relative cell addresses into the formula and say, give me E23 by E6, and then I can just copy the whole thing over. And it will do relative cell addresses. Grand total doesn't even make sense here because it's quotients. So this is the weirdest one. This is the weirdest one so far. It doesn't. The numbers do not correlate at all the way I was hoping they would. They're quite a bit apart. Now the thing is, how much of a range do I accept? And how random are these numbers? Because when I look at Charlotte, I get 1707, I get 1680, I get 1679, 1697, 1692, 1660. And except from this last outlier, I get something like 5% up or down. So yeah, it appears to be a little bit random. When I see in New York City, first I have a pretty high quotient, then I get, it plummets quite a bit, then it goes up a little bit, goes up a little bit, goes down a little bit again. It appears to be a little bit random. Now, it's not like one store has appears to be selling only the cheap products, or there's one specific month where they're all selling the cheap products. So these deviations appear to be random, except for this one in December. It seems, at least in Charlotte, people seem to be a little more generous with their money, buying the more expensive products. But all in all, it appears to be random. And now the next question is, who is this plan actually for? And how will this be communicated? I have seen plans that were a total house of horrors, where people just put in revenue and margin numbers based on wishful thinking or on personal convenience, and they just put it into the manager's targets and didn't care at all what was the consequences for the people on the ground. And I've seen really high quality plannings where people asked a lot of intelligent questions and identified relevant dynamics and knew when there was a deviation happening and why that was. They could analyze it quite quickly and react in a mostly very rational and competent manner. In this case, the planning is going to be an orientation for the management. For the people in the actual shops, they cannot do so much about the sales. I mean, depending on how they behave as salespeople, they can do a bit, but they cannot really double the revenue or put it up like 30% through their personality or their own behavior. That will be more a strategic thing for management to do, for marketing and for general operations and for purchasing. So therefore, I think these are deviations we can live with. It's not like we have 30% deviations. And also we do not actually have any patterns I can recognize. Look, I mean, in December it's quite a bit of a range, although December tends to be a little higher than the other months in all stores. So yeah, probably towards December people become more generous with the money which they either have or don't have. And we do not have one shop that is particularly outstanding. I would have expected New York to have a higher quotient, and yeah, it's a little bit higher. Los Angeles is a bit higher, but not really super outstanding. So I think we can accept these deviations, and a plan is a plan. And yeah, since I do not recognize any major patterns, I'm just gonna go on as planned. Next, I'm going to examine the amounts per shop. So give me another pivot table from data model and a new worksheet, please. And this time I'm going to put the cities into the columns, the products into the rows, and then please count the amounts. I would like the count, please. What we can see very quickly is that our Ladybug Layla medium size is one of the big sellers, the biggest, exceeds all the others. Maybe that is already the effect from the children's show where the main character has one. Might very well be. Particularly the medium size one is the highest seller, while our superheroine is not doing so great. Superhero not doing so great. And also the witch and the wizard are not doing that great. What I sometimes do when I apply for a project, when I'm interviewing for a project, I will bring some ideas with me. So that increases my chances of getting the project if the company sees, hey, this guy is actually thinking about our business. He's actually put in some thought without getting paid for it. And I don't always get the job, but it certainly increases my chances. What I brought was a birthday distribution because whenever you have something that lends itself to being a birthday present, like plush animals, plush dolls, you can reckon that in the birthday season they're going to be presented as birthday presents. And it turns out that September and August in the United States are actually the months where the most birthdays are. So I got the distribution from an official website and brought it. But it turns out it wasn't so great for this purpose because the distributions are very different from that in this case. So I'm going to find the actual distributions per store. I'm going to copy this sheet, move to the end, and calculate percentages. And say, again, I'm not going to click onto the cells because then I get absolute cell addresses and I'm going to spend half a day clicking into every cell. I don't want that. So what I will do is I will divide. In this case, Charlotte January is going to be, it is B6 by, and now I want to fixate only the column N with a dollar sign. I want that as a percentage with 2 digits after the comma. And now I can just copy the whole thing. Let's see if it's aiming at the correct cells every time. What we can see now is that we have quite a high weight in December as expected. Not equally high, like in Phoenix we have 29.7%, while in New York City 24. Oh, in Los Angeles we even have over 34%. While the other months are mostly between 6 and 8%. Yeah, we do not have higher revenue, particularly in September, only in a few stores. August is not really high. So again, how precisely do we do this? Because we do not know how random these numbers are. We only have data for 1 year. And this happens sometimes when I go into a big corporation, they just won't give me more data and they're going to be reluctant and apprehensive about it. I mean, this is not a really big company, but sometimes people are a bit guarded about their data. They don't want to show you. They say, just make do with what we give you. So we could choose an average of, what would be the average? Like 25% maybe? Oh, 24.2% would be the average for this. We could say that's the average for December, and the rest we're going to distribute more or less evenly over the months, because it could be random. We don't know, and we don't want to give targets that are too arbitrary. So therefore, I'm going to think about this for a few minutes and then make a decision how we do it. Of course, explore the option of talking to people on the ground in the stores. And when you talk to people on the ground, you get a variety of qualification in the answers. Some people, they just want to run a nice, tidy shop. They just want to be nice to the customers, have fun with the kids, be a good salesperson and do a good job that way. And some other people understand the market, they understand marketing, they understand the products, they understand the specific market for the products, they understand the region and the city and the people and the local conditions and all that. And it really varies quite a bit. So in this case, I make suggestions at many points in the planning process. I make suggestions to management and say, hey, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do it that way? And they will either go with it or not. And since this plan is really an orientation for management, not so much for the shop owners, they probably won't see much of the plan if they get to see it at all. And it's also a question of communication. Like, I knew one woman who was running an 11 people business together with her partner. And whenever she saw something that appeared to be a rough deviation from the plan, she would literally start crying and shaking. She was smart enough not to run out to the employees and let the employees and the customers see that. But that was just a heavy reaction because she got really scared. And in every case where I was present, we could easily explain the deviation. It was never a big deal. So that was either a data mistake or an interpretation mistake. So the shop owners themselves are probably not even going to see this. This is just an orientation for the leadership, so they can compare, and hopefully they're in most cases middle management and top management. With the smaller companies, top management, in my experience, is quite reasonable and rational, and they don't flip out so much, and they don't get funny in any way. That's my experience for the most part. In big companies, top management can be a little different, but it also varies. So let's see. I just put the average of 24.2%, which is the average from last year of all the stores. I put that as a percentage weight in December. Then I said, okay, September is the month with the most birthdays. Let's assume it's a little more they're selling. Let's make February a little less because it's a shorter month. And maybe, January, I don't know, maybe make 6.8%. Put 6.8% in January maybe. And then see what is left. Okay, we have 51.9%, so that means we have 48.1% left to distribute for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months. So 48.1% divided by 7 is roughly 6.87%. I put a little more in July for no reason I have a really good excuse for. It's just a guess. It's really a guess. So, and the other months get 6.87%. From now on, we can go on and do the actual distribution of amounts weighed by prices. Now let's apply the first ideas by management. Jacksonville is expected to lose business to the new superstore from the competition. Maybe let's say we take them down 50%. Let's cut the amounts in half. Then, since we all in all expect 9% consumption to go down by 9%, let's do 9% down for all products except the Ladybug. Let's take that one up 30%. And let's apply price raises of 4%. How's that? Discuss that with management, suggest, discuss, and arrive at, yeah, okay, that's the way we're going to do it. Okay, let's deal with the biggest pain point first, Jacksonville. We need whole numbers, of course, because half a plush doll won't make much sense. So equals round. And then I'm going to, again, not click into the cell because I want to copy. So I'm going to type the cell address. Jacksonville, the first one is F5 divided by 2. Round to 0 digits after the comma. Copy that down. All right. And then take everything down to 91%. So if we lose 9%, we stay with 91%. Copy that and then do an override for the Ladybug. And do that for all sizes maybe? Yeah, do that for all sizes. So this is going to be round that. And then I need B5 multiplied by 91%, which equals, 91% equals times .91. Just don't do it to Jacksonville. Do 30% up for the Ladybugs. Multiply by 1.3 if we wanted to go up 30%. 0 digits after the comma. Thank you very much. First copy that down. Then copy it across. Just remember to not touch Jacksonville. Now the next question is, in what form is the plan going to be incorporated into management accounting? A company with this kind of revenue, with like almost 2.7 million a year, which is going to be probably less next year, they're not going to run SAP or a big Oracle system. They're probably going to run some small accounting software, something not too expensive, hopefully something with cost centers. And so with a big corporation, of course, we would put in the products, we would put in the exact amounts, we would put in a big table with a lot of information. Into Power BI, we would also put a lot of data, a lot of information. But this time the planning is just an orientation for management, and it shouldn't be too expensive, it shouldn't be too big. So the question is, how are we going to do this? Most important point is that this plan is based on amounts. This plan is not based on something arbitrary or something that someone pulled out of a hat or somewhere else. And we could just multiply the projected revenue with the projected numbers, multiply that with the projected distribution over the stores, and there we would have it. And then you could still show that the plan was based on amounts, and if you have any deviation, you could dive into this table and see, hey, we made much less revenue and much less margin. Why is that? Well, maybe because the Ladybug sales didn't go up as much as planned, or Jacksonville actually did lose 70% to the competition, or some catastrophe happened in Chicago or whatever. Or writers go on strike in Los Angeles, movies can't be made, nobody has any money, and then that goes down. No plush animals for birthday because movie doesn't get made. Something happened. Hopefully nothing happens again in New York City, but who knows? But so we could go in and see what actually are the deviations. Are the deviations in amounts? Do we have to pay higher purchase prices than planned? Or what else is the reason? One could always refer back to this Excel workbook. Now let's deal with some of the things that Connor said. First, about the products. He expects an increase in purchase prices depending on the countries where the plush animals and dolls are made. So let's put that into the calculation and deal with rents and salaries later. Here we have made the calculations based on Connor's projections. We had a retail price in 2022. We said let's raise that about 4%. So we just multiplied with 1.04 and then manually adapted it to a new retail price, because like $29.76 and $12.47, well, $12.47 maybe, but $18.71 doesn't really lend itself to a good retail price. Only a Ladybug Lila we raised a bit more, and the others we raised roughly 4% and then manually adapted. The new purchase prices were calculated based on the production country. So we have an old margin, and then we estimated a rise. So for Bulgaria, there was a projected rise. For Hungary, for Turkey, for China, there was a projected rise, and then we have a new purchase price. Therefore, we get a new margin. The thing that was not so smart was not bringing the product ID into the table. And now we want to have the revenue and the purchasing costs and the margin. With the product ID, it would be easier. I mean, it's usually easier to get a VLOOKUP working with numbers than with text, because you get one typo, you get one space too much, and then you're out. You're not getting the result you want. It could still be done. It can still be done in this case. So the VLOOKUP is for the product name. Then I would like to have the full window, please. Go into the dim products, starting with this one. Give it an absolute address, pressing F4. New price is in column 10. 0. There you go. And of course that multiplied with the total. And the margin we can just do as a subtraction. Now, there is a point where Microsoft Excel has its limits in the planning. One reason not to do this with Excel is anybody changes one figure, anybody accidentally deletes one row, one column, one table, the whole model dies. So, like if this company had an SAP business warehouse, of course you would put all the numbers in, you would make giant complex tables with all the figures for each store, for each month, and with exact calculations. Now what I'm going to do in this case, this is going to be a pretty big model still. I mean, not really gigantically big, but yeah, it is going to be a fairly complex model because you want to check back later and see, why do we have deviations? Do we have deviations in amounts? Do we have deviations in price? Is the distribution completely different from what we assumed? And so forth. So what I'm going to do this amount calculation with revenue, purchasing, and margin for each single store, and then take at least definitely revenue and maybe purchasing and margin and put that into the monthly distributions for the stores. Yeah, in this case, this is probably the limits to which I would expand this. I have already done this with 2 cities. And how do we do this? We copy this thing to the end. This is going to be Columbus. Move the formula to the numbers for Columbus. Double click, copy them down. Do the same thing with the purchasing. Then the margin automatically adjusts because that's a subtraction. And we do this for all the different cities. Since we have a distribution for each month, percentage-wise, we can just copy it over to each city. Okay, this one can go 1 down to make them really unified. And then we just take the sum. We would like rounded to 2 digits. Number to 2 digits. Okay, take this. Fixate this with F4. Multiply it with a percentage. We would like 2 digits after the dot, please. We can just copy that down. We do the same thing with the purchasing. Unfortunately, we cannot copy this from sheet. Oh, can we? Probably can, right? Probably can, because it's it's the same amount of rows, so that might even actually work. Let's see. That multiplied by percentage. Copy that. Zip, and the margin we can again do as a subtraction. And that will be a nice little test. If the same amount comes out, 150,000 something. Yeah, same thing. All right, so that should actually work if we copy that over. See? Come on. Now we have a basic revenue and margin planning. Put some colors in. It's sort of a personal preference of mine to put revenue in green, direct costs in a reddish tone, and then margin in blue. So this is a good start. Now we only have to put in the shop costs, and then we have the projected shop profit. From general operations, Connor estimated that rent and utilities would go up 12%. So here we have the new. Rent new, and the salaries would stagnate, he estimated. So we just have to put these into the stores. These are the monthly values. So we can just do that with an equal sign. Now here we have a pretty detailed plan for Charlotte. We have the revenue for each month, purchasing for each month, margin, salaries, rent and utilities projected, and then the shop profit. It's not going to do super well, except in December. And I also have the product amounts projected onto the months. Now the question is, how is this going to be used as when you do the plan and is comparison? Of course, if you run SAP, you can put in anything. You can put in product amounts, you can put in the revenue, all sorts of costs, all sorts of formulas and factors. That's not a problem. Or like you use Odoo, which is another ERP system that's quite popular, that is fit for that. The cheaper software that I know, the cheaper accounting software, you can only put in revenue, purchasing, then margin will be a result in a calculation. You can put in the salaries and rent and utilities as plan values. The cheaper ones, the smaller ones, do not allow you to put in the amounts of products. So probably when we see they had about 2.7 million revenue last year, they're probably not running SAP. They're probably running something smaller. So they will most likely put the monthly values as shown here, with cost centers for each shop. For Chicago, I've not distributed the product amounts. I've done this for every city. And we see they're all going to suffer a bit if December Christmas business doesn't save them. And Jacksonville is going to have a really tough year. Depending on whether the projection of losing 50% business is correct, or maybe they might lose 65% of the business, then it's going to be even more painful. The only shop that will generate a profit all through the year, if projections are correct, will be Los Angeles. And all the others are going to have a tough time. Yeah, even New York City. Small losses, but this means that the shop assistants all get paid from the salary. So they have already been paid. Then the rent has been paid. Management hasn't been paid yet. Yeah. Philadelphia also not so great. Phoenix, just on the edge. Here I have a table that only has the shop profits each month. For each shop, shop personnel has already been paid. Rent has already been paid. Management has not been paid yet. So they're gonna, if the projections are accurate, they're gonna end up somewhere at 165,000, which they can pay management, from which then management has to pay taxes. So it's not that rosy. In the year before, they had about just under 2.7 million revenue. They had about 1.6 million margin, and then they had a 250,000 profit, roughly. So that still isn't great, for management to get paid and pay taxes from it. They were hoping to do better, but now this is based on real assumptions, real projections that were thought through, and actual amounts and numbers and figures that are probably close to reality. We don't know. Jacksonville might be losing even more business. It might be doing even worse. It might be doing better. We don't know. So an actual real question at this moment might be, do we pull the plug, take the money and run? Can we get out of the leases? Can we get rid of the personnel? That might be a question. Other options might be to try more marketing, to get cheaper suppliers that can still deliver a similar quality. At any rate, this is a solid quality plan. The numbers can be put into the management accounting system, however that will be done. And this Excel workbook, as long as nobody fiddles about with it, is a good reference to go back and find how the plan was made and what assumptions it was based on. So, as usual, Godspeed, have fun, see you next time.